everybody. Thank you for being here. Happy Thursday, which is kind of like our Friday, right? This is the final installment. It's bittersweet. The final installment of the Empowerment Through Education Speaker Series. I am Dr. Smith. Hi, welcome. Hi. I'm Dr. Smith. I am one of the child development faculty here at West LA, and I am so pleased to have been able to get Bob up to come in and share with you today. So many of you probably saw the flyer that was distributed on campus, but I'm just going to read a little bit from his bio so that you kind of know the greatness that we have in our midst. So Bob the Storyteller is a highly sought after speaker, educator, and author who has presented in literally thousands of schools and other institutions all around the world. He is a recipient of a California State Assembly Certificate of Recognition for his commitment to community in working with youth throughout Southern California. The city of Long Beach, California recognized Baba as their municipality's Artist of the Year, an award presented to him by the mayor. He has also earned additional commendations from both the U.S. Senate and the U.S. Congress and was presented the prestigious Heritage Award by the Aquarium of the Pacific. The 33rd District Parent Teachers Association awarded him a Certificate of Excellence for his work in schools. Fluent in Spanish, French, and the West African language of Bamana, is that right? Bamana. He is single-handedly redefining what it means to be a culturally responsive educator. And that is why we brought him here today, because that's kind of our goal, is to all kind of enrich ourselves with culturally responsive teaching and learning. That's our goal with this speaker series. He's recently published book, Road of Ash and Dust, Awakening a Soul in Africa, chronicles his earlier travels to Africa to learn the ancient craft that he tours the world sharing now. So amazing accomplishments. I'm so pleased to introduce Baba the Storyteller.
Before I start, just a show of hands. How many of you in the future are going to be working in some form of an educational institution, whether it be a school, an NGO, or working with children? Raise them high, because I'm old and my eyes, okay, my eyes don't function like they used to. All right. This is, what we're going to do today is going to be a little unusual to some of you, because it's not anything that you would have ever received in school if I didn't come here. This is not anything you'll ever cross paths with probably ever again in your life. I practice an ancient art out of West Africa called Jaliyaa. Jaliyaa. It's an educational art, but in West Africa they don't see it that way. It's just a part of their culture. But because I was born here, usually if you are not in a culture, you see things differently than the people who are of it. So because I was born here, I had unique insight into my trips and my travels and living in Africa. Now, there's a couple of questions that people always ask that I'm gonna get out of the way now. First, go ahead.
What is Jaliyaa?
Okay, I'm gonna get to that. But I have some things in my brain that people always ask, so I'm gonna get those out of the way. First thing, they see me wearing African clothing, they wanna know what part of Africa you're from. I wasn't born in Africa, I was born here. It's the first thing. Then people always want to know, well, you were born here, why do you wear African clothes? Let me explain why I wear African clothes. And I don't only wear African clothes, but you know, I got a lot of different clothes I wear. African clothing are a part of that. But when I was young growing up, I spent a lot of time with my great-grandfather. My great-grandfather lived to be 110. 110. My great-grandfather's father was the last person that we have a record of in my family line to have been enslaved. I'm going to assume everybody here knows about this nation's history with slavery. Okay. I am a descendant of those people who were enslaved. Some people call themselves black, some people call themselves African Americans, those of us who are descendant of those who were enslaved. That's who I am. Now, my great-grandfather taught me the importance of knowing who you are, your identity. So when I was growing up, schools did not teach you anything about an identity unless it was Eurocentric, unless it was European. So most of my education as far as culture and identity came from my family. Times have changed a little, but that's where I got most of my education about who I am. My great-grandfather taught me that our ancestors came here from Africa. Now, as a kid, that didn't mean anything to me. Didn't mean anything at all. But as I grew older, I started to learn more and more about what that meant. What it means to be someone who is a descendant of those who were enslaved. What it means to be multicultural, multiracial, what those identities are. So I went to Africa and I lived in Africa for a while. I went to Africa, I lived there a while because I wanted to explore that side of myself. That was a very rough journey. When I came back, I started doing some of the work that we're doing. Now, I was born here. I raised my kids in Compton. I started this work in Compton in the mid-'80s, all the way up into the mid-'90s, early 2000s. I don't have to tell y'all how different things were in the mid-'80s and the '90s. You guys look old enough to know what was going on back then, right? Okay, so my job back then was to help young boys cross into manhood, because that was something that was missing in our community. What was missing in our community was a connection to elders. So a group of men, and at that time, I was probably no older than most of the people in this room. I say a group of men. We decided we were going to get together. We were going to scoop up all the young men in the streets of Compton, Linwood, Lakewood, Cudahy, Long Beach, and we were going to make this program called the Rites of Passage Program, and we were going to turn the world around. We're going to turn the world around. My job in that program was to help the youth understand who they were, their identity. Because if you don't know who you are, you're liable to act out in any kind of way. It's like a boat that has no mooring, no rudder. It just goes around, and whichever way the water flows, that's where you go. So the way that I found effective was, having learned in Africa, I started using stories. I started using storytelling and stories, because what I discovered is in the African American community, stories and storytelling are a natural aspect of the culture. We don't identify it as such, but it is. Ministers up in pulpits tell stories, all right? Singers, musicians tell stories, dancers tell stories, spoken word artists share stories, rappers share stories. Stories are an integral part of the identity of African American people. But I was able to make the connection between why they were so rooted in our community here and Africa. So I started using stories to help educate the youth. Now, I'm gonna tell you how long ago this was. Many of these youth are in their mid-30s now. Many of them have families and children. So I've been doing this for a long time. But at some point, I started getting the attention of media. I started getting attention of people who were interested in this new, I guess you could call it pedagogy, if you want to. This new pedagogy. And they couldn't understand why me and the men that I was working with were so effective. They couldn't understand why we were so effective. Why it was that when these young boys went to school, they had all these discipline problems, and they were being sent to the office, or they were being suspended, and there were all these problems in schools, but when we got them, there were zero problems. So we started working in schools. Now, I don't know if you know this, but most schools are populated by women teachers. Most schools are populated by women teachers. Education as an institution is populated majority by women. There are strengths in that, but there are also weaknesses. I would say the same thing if it was populated predominantly by men. There would be strengths and there would be weaknesses. So what we found was by combining our resources, we were able to be successful in schools. So here's what I'm gonna do. I could lecture, I could talk all day, but you guys determine what we're gonna do here today. The ancient craft of Jaliyaa, I could take to the board, I could lay out all the different aspects of it as a pedagogy and how it works and how it functions and how you could use it. Or we could do Jaliyaa. Those are two different things. Those are two different things. We can lecture or we can do it. But it's not up to me. In this craft, the people who are present determine what happens. The griot, the one who practices this ancient art, is not someone who comes to teach. They are someone who comes to learn. I know it's a different paradigm in a culture, but anytime I travel, and I travel all over the world, I don't go to teach anybody anything. I go to learn. I go to learn. So you determine what we do, not me. My job, and this is what we'll say here, is to differentiate. Oh, it's not up there. Do you guys know what differentiation is? You guys got that, right?
Yeah.
Did they get that definition, differentiation?
I'm somewhat understanding.
Okay, basically differentiating is taking someone's strength as an educator and playing to that strength so that they can learn. So you play to that strength so they can learn, basically. So the griot's job, or the traditional storyteller's job, is to differentiate for the people that are in front of him or her. So I'm going to ask you, lecture or doing? Which one do y'all want?
Doing.
Yeah.
I did not hear a single lecture in there at all. A show of hands, because I want to be fair. Not everybody speaks up. Some people are a little more timid, but they will vote if they raise their hands. How many people would prefer a lecture? No. How many people want to do it? Okay, hands down. Let me warn you. If you say that's what you want, then you have to be involved in the process. You cannot say that is what you want, and then you extricate yourself from the process. So I'm going to ask one more time. Do you want a lecture or do you want to do this?
Do it.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So from this point on, here's what's going to happen. We're going to jump into this cultural paradigm called Jaliyaa. We're going to jump into it. I'm going to start doing what I do when I travel the world, when I work with professional development with educators, when I work with teachers, when I work with students of different ages. We're just going to jump into it. Now, when we jump into it, I'm not going to explain anything. I'm just going to keep going. But I need you to give back. If I give to you, you give back. There needs to be reciprocity in this relationship, because if there is no reciprocity, there is no relationship. So we need to give back. Whatever I give you, you give back. That's the first thing. Now here's the other thing. I have 2 rules. That's all I got. I've got 2 rules. No matter what age I work with, no matter where I go in the world, I've got 2 rules. Rule number 1 is very simple. If you give me your eyes, I promise you, music and stories. I'm going to say it again in case you did not hear me. If you give me your eyes, I promise you music and stories. The second rule applies to those who listen with their hearts. Everyone is capable of listening with their heart, but everyone does not. Listening with your heart, we are born doing it, but as we grow older, it is pushed out of us. Some of us maintain it, some of us don't. I'm going to show you. My rule number 2 will show you the people who listen with their hearts. Rule number 2. If I give you my eyes, you give me your
Ears.
Stop. The people who spoke up and said ears are the people in this room who are already prepared to listen with their hearts. Let me explain why. The people who spoke up and said ears, when I did this, they were watching me. They were listening. They were paying close attention. They know most of you are familiar with each other, but I don't know any of you. So when I went silent, they wanted to show me that someone in this room understood me, understood what I wanted. They didn't want to leave me here standing in silence. They wanted to help me when I did this. So they said ears. Now I'm not castigating anyone, but just listen to me, because we're going through this, we're already in it. I'm not castigating anyone. Because this society does not teach us to listen with our hearts. It teaches us to listen with our ears only. Everyone's capable of listening with your heart. And while we're doing Jaliyaa, you're going to need to employ your heart more than your ears. So I'm going to say rule number 2 again. And when I say rule number 2 this time, I want everyone, use your hearts, and you will see how much stronger we are together. Rule number 2, everybody. Rule number 2, if I give you my eyes, you give me your
Ears.
Now, do you hear how much stronger that sounds?
Yes.
Some people would say it's stronger because more voices are involved. That's not why it's stronger. What makes it stronger is the intent behind the voice. When you spoke up this time, you knew I'm speaking from my heart. That's intent. So when you come from that intent, you are truly listening with your heart. While we're doing Jaliyaa, we're going to engage the heart, not the ears. Here's the other thing. I speak a few different languages. The language I speak out of West Africa is called Bamana. Now, Bamana is only one of more than 800 languages that I speak that are on the continent of Africa. Yeah, I don't speak 800 languages. There's only one of more than 800 languages. Now, I'm going to say some things in Jaliyaa. We're going to be doing something because there's a lot of rhythm involved. There's a lot of rhythm involved. And you'll see what I mean once we really jump in deeper. Sometimes in the middle of talking, singing, and telling stories, you're going to hear me say something. Pay close attention. Yeah, I do speed up when I talk, but other times I might slow down. This is part of the craft of Jaliyaa. Jaliyaa, pay close attention. Because when I talk, sing, or tell stories and I stop, you're going to hear me say these words. Maybe some of you know it, maybe some of you don't. Batio bati. Okay, y'all never heard that before. Okay, when I say batio bati, everyone who hears me, if you hear my voice and you hear me say that, you say back, bati.
Bati.
Like that. I say batio bati, you all say bati. Now you gotta be together. It's important that everyone is together because when you're together, you're strong. When you are not together, you are weak. We want to create strength. Strength is in togetherness. So when I say my part, you should all be together on your part. One more time. Batio bati, bati. And then after you say it, everybody goes quiet. Because something is going to follow. This will help us with the rhythm of moving into Jaliyaa. Batio bati,
Bati.
and then everyone goes quiet. Also, the second thing you have to do is give me back what I give you. Give me back what I give you. If I say my part loud, then I need you to say your part loud. If I whisper my part, I need you to whisper bati back. You got to be ready for whatever I give you. I don't know how it's coming out of my mouth. I don't even know when. It'll just come out. And when it does, you have to be ready to give back. Let's try 3. 1 here. Batio bati.
Bati.
Then everyone goes quiet. 1, I could be talking, singing, and telling a story, but right about here. Batio bati.
Bati.
And then I could be talking, singing, and telling a story, and then in the middle of it, I might just whisper, Batio bati. If you give me your eyes, I promise you, music and stories. If I give you my eyes, you give me your
Ears.
Batio bati. Bati. Don't forget those words. They're going to come out of my mouth. I have a feeling we're going to get into this and y'all are going to forget. Do not forget those words. Okay, so I'm going to stop. What we were doing was actually a part of Jaliyaa. I'm setting up the environment the way it needs to be. The storyteller, the teacher, if you want to use that, the griot, is responsible for the space. The space, and I'm not talking religion, do not get caught up in religion because I'm not using the language of religion. The space, anytime you bring a group of human beings together, the space is sacred. The space is sacred because no matter how you try to replicate this, this gathering will never ever be repeated, which makes it sacred. The human beings in this room who are here in this time, in this space, will never occupy it together like this ever again. So the responsibility of the storyteller, the teacher, the griot, whatever you want to call them, is to make sure that the space takes on the energy that it needs to take on. Batio bati.
Bati.
Now, when I stop, I'm going to say, listen carefully, I'm going to say, does anyone have a question they want to ask me? And then I'm going to count down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. If no one raises their hand and that, I didn't do it yet, but I'm going to get there. But if no one raises their hand in that time when I ask that, I keep moving. I keep moving. Now remember this, an opportunity lost is when you will never regain. There is no such thing as a second chance. I know you hear that a lot in life, but there are times when you take hold of an opportunity, and that is that moment. That is that opportunity's moment. It's the same with questions. However number of questions you get to in here is determined by you, not me. Does anyone have anything they want to ask before we move on? 5, 4, tell me your name.
I'm Dr. Michelle's,
Dr. Michelle, and your question.
and I heard you speak French on YouTube. Where in West Africa did you live? Did you?
Senegal, Guinea, Gambia, Mali, and a little in Ghana, but Ghana is English.
Right.
Gambia is English speaking. But I was in the Francophone areas for a long time. But that French is not the same as Parisian French.
No, but it's beautiful French.
Yeah, the French that I learned was Parisian French, which when I went to Africa, nobody understood a dang thing I was saying. So I had to adapt my French to African French, which is a very different French. Yeah. Yes, sir.
My name is Darius, and how long did you live in Africa?
If I put all the time together, a few years. I went back and forth. So sometimes I'd stay for 4 months, 6 months. So if I put all the time together, a few years. Yeah. Okay, any other questions before we move on? Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned in your lecture that when you were in Africa, it was a rough journey. In what way? What do you mean rough?
Oh, what do I mean by rough? Y'all heard me say I was born here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I thought I was born into poverty.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know poverty until I got to the part of Africa that I went to. Because we don't have poor here. I'm just going to tell you, we do not have poverty here the way that it exists in other parts of the world. I wasn't prepared for that. I wasn't prepared for that. So in my very first journey, I was a young cat. Hey, I try. I'm me, all right? I'm just me. I was a young guy, and in my journey, I was very ego-driven, which almost cost me my life. I wasn't prepared for the sickness that I encountered. I almost died because I wasn't ready. I went thinking I was going to show Africa something, and Africa showed me quite a bit. Basically, that's what happened.
At that time?
At that
Long
time.
time ago.
Oh, so long ago. In fact, I didn't write about that journey until I was over 50 years old. I wasn't ready to write about that journey when I was young. And when I crossed 50, I found out I was ready to write about the journey. That's when the book came out. The book didn't come out until after I was 50-something. Yeah. Bati o bati?
Bati.
Oh, no. See? Tone. Many languages in the world are tonal, all right? How you say something is more important than what you say. You guys know this? This exists in our society too, but at a lesser degree. So, how I say it, I need you to give it back. You guys know the importance of tone? Tone tells you how someone feels. So when I give you something, you should feel what I give. And when you give it back, I should feel that you understand me. Now, if I say it here and y'all come back down here, that's not giving. That is taking. I'm not going to be in a room with a bunch of takers. All right? Bati o bati.
Bati.
Let me give you an example of tone. I'm going to give you an example of the importance of tone. In Bamana, here are 2 words said in different tones. Say this. Say, let me make sure I remember. So.
So.
No, say it high. So.
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 Those are 2 completely different words. So in a conversation, you have to hit the right tone. Because when you say it high, like so, that means dwelling, a place where a person lives. When you say so, it means horse. So you can really mess up in a conversation if you're not paying attention to tone. Okay? Bati o bati?
Bati.
No, I'm going to expect more out of you. Listen to the tone. Use your heart. Listen with your heart. Bati.
Bati.
You feel the difference.
Yeah.
That's what you have to do. Now, let's jump back into Jaliyaa. And then I'll stop. See if we have any more questions. I'll stop. But let's keep moving. The next thing I want to do is, I want you guys to learn a little Bamana. Just a little. I want to hear these words repeated back. Say these words back. Yeah, Jaliyaa.
Yeah.
Alaleka.
Alaleka.
Jaliyaa da.
Jaliyaa.
I'm anglicizing those words, all right? I'm anglicizing them so that you can hear what they sound like. That's not what they actually sound like, but just know, okay? One more time. Yeah, Jaliyaa.
Yeah, Jaliyaa.
Alaleka.
Alaleka.
Jaliyaa da.
Jaliyaa.
Now we're going to combine it and we're going to make a longer phrase. First part, yeah, Jaliyaa.
Yeah, Jaliyaa.
Now we're going to combine it, make a longer phrase. Alaleka Jaliyaa da.
Alaleka Jaliyaa da.
And you got it. That's it. Hold on to that. Bati.
Bati.
Now, the jelly, that's the traditional word. The French use the term griot. Well, I'll interchange those, griot or jelly. Is the person who does the work that I'm doing in front of you now. And they've been doing this since the 13th century. It is a craft. Jaliyaa is a craft that has been going on since the 13th century. Now the job of the jelly, and the jelly could be a man or a woman, they both had the same job. The jelly would go from village to village to village, and they would take the news of the day. They would take the edicts of the royal family. They would take stories and pass them from village to village. They would teach the people about their history and who they are and who they were in the past. They would celebrate the genealogies of the people because they were the repositories of the knowledge. They were the walking, living, breathing libraries. Nothing was written. So the jelly passed on his or her craft to their daughters, to their sons. It was passed down through the blood. And when the jelly would go into a village, they would announce themselves. They would let everyone know, we're here. It's time to gather. It's time to hear the stories. We're coming together. So she would walk into the village and she would sing out, yeah, Jaliyaa. And the people, when they hear this and they're working in the fields or if they're working in their homes, when they hear it, they know it's time to gather. So they come running to the center from the fields, from their homes, and they sing back, yeah, Jaliyaa. That lets her know, they're coming, they hear me. And she continues singing. She goes to the center of the village, the people begin to gather around, Alaleka Jaliyaa da. And the people come, they gather around, Alaleka Jaliyaa da. And then the stories begin, once everyone is present. Y'all ready? So, y'all are gonna sing after me. Are y'all ready?
Yeah.
Why y'all look scared? Everybody look all nervous, like, before I said y'all gotta sing, everybody's relaxed and sipping. Now I say we gotta sing and people are like. In our culture here, in this society, we have a term that is very subjective called a good voice. In many cultures in the world, there is no such thing as a good voice. The most important thing in a gathering is not your voice, but it's that you add your voice in. It's like listening with your heart. It's what makes us powerful. The more people that add their voices in, the stronger we become. Bati.
Bati.
If one person holds back and everyone is adding their voice, if one person holds back, it's like a gourd or a wooden bowl, right? Everyone is filling it with their energy. And the one person that holds back is poking a tiny hole. So no matter how hard we work, that energy is spilling out through that tiny hole. Which is why listening with your heart is so important. So nobody hold back, because we're going to do this together. A good voice is subjective. All right? After me, reciprocity. Yeah, Jaliyaa. Yeah, Jaliyaa. Jaliyaa da, alaleka Jaliyaa da. Okay, I sang over y'all on purpose. I wanted everybody to be comfortable with that first one, okay? So now, you got it out of your system. You feel okay now, right?
Yeah.
So now, I'm gonna sing. It's call and response. Call and response. Something typical in Africa, something typical among African Americans. Call and response. So when I call, give me the response. Reciprocity. Give me back what I give you. Yeah, Jaliyaa.
Yeah, Jaliyaa.
No. I gotta be honest, and I'm always gonna be honest, all right? That was weak. That was weak. I stood up here and I pushed it. I pushed it out, all right? I was Luther Vandross in that right there, okay? Y'all came back lower. There has to always be reciprocities in your relationships. If there is no reciprocity, that means you are doing the giving and whomever you are in the relationship with is doing the taking. Don't let that happen in your lives. In indigenous cultures, this is how you learn these things. In our culture, we like to tell you, this is what you do. We have a really Socratic method of, like, this is what you do, you need to listen to me, take notes. But no, that's not how most people learn. Most people learn through feeling, through doing, through exercising it out. This is your opportunity to exercise that out. One more time. Yeah, Jaliyaa.
Yeah, Jaliyaa.
There you go. Alaleka Jaliyaa da.
Alaleka Jaliyaa da.
Give yourselves a hand. Finally, y'all pulled it together. That's what I was looking for. Okay, Batio Bati.
Bati.
Anyone have any questions before we move on? 5? Yes, ma'am. Tell me your name first, please.
Bonnie.
Bonnie, and your
What does
question.
Bati mean?
What do the words mean? Batio Bati. Batio Bati is an agreement. It's an agreement between people. Elders use the words I use, and younger people say Bati. When elders approach young people and they say Batio Bati, the closest translation is your heart open to me? When everyone says Bati, everyone is saying our hearts are open to you. You're giving me permission to do what I do because your heart is open to me. That's the meaning. Yeah. It's funny, when I go to elementary schools, kids always like, does that mean shut up? No, it does not mean shut up. It's an agreement. And if you're going to be an effective educator, well, if you're going to be an effective human being, you've got to reach agreements with those you are intimate with. And the most intimate relationships you will ever have aren't just for family, they are where you are going to work, where you are going to spend a lot of your time. There are agreements that have to be established. Reciprocity is book 1. Batio Bati.
Bati.
Any other questions before we move on? Yes, sir. Tell me your name.
Darius.
Darius, your question.
What part of Africa or African culture does Jaliyaa stand for?
Jaliyaa comes from, okay, I love the question because I get this a lot. The map we see of Africa with all these lines on it was created by Europeans. That is not a true representation of Africa, all right? The part of Africa that Jaliyaa comes from is west. So here's our reference point, Darius. Here's our reference point. If we look at the map and we see Senegal, Mali, Guinea, Gambia, all the way down to Sierra Leone, right before Nigeria, up above Nigeria. In the 13th century, that whole area was united into one empire. And it was united into one empire under a man, an emperor named Sunjata Keita. He was the one who brought that entire area together. Even though these people spoke different language, in the 13th century, that was one empire. Now, we don't learn about this kind of stuff. We really never learn about this kind of stuff. But this doesn't have anything to do with what I'm supposed to tell you, but I'm going to tell you anyway. Hollywood is amazing. Because they took Sunjata's story, repackaged it, and gave it to you without the history. without the history. Sundiata in Bamana is known as Mansejata. Mansejata. It was foretold, he had a spirit animal, and it was foretold before he was born that this was his spirit animal. Now, Mansa in Bamana means king. Jata, his spirit animal, was a lion. Lion. Oh, y'all need your coffee, huh? How many of y'all have ever seen The Lion King? The Lion King is a beautiful work of art. It was based on the life of this 13th century emperor I'm telling you about, Sundiata Keita. He was Mansa Jata, the Lion King. Yeah. Any other question? Yes. Yes, Darius.
Would that entire united area be from the Bantu tribes? That sound like it?
Bantu? You've been doing some reading. Let me help you out a little bit, okay? All right. Bantu is a term that is not really, it's a European term that designates a group or different groups in Africa, okay? When Europeans talked about the Bantus, most of the people they were talking about were in South Africa, the indigenous people near South Africa. And the term Bantu was most popular in the 1800s. So that would be equivalent, like some people use terms interchangeably. Instead of Bantu, like today we could say African. Instead of Bantu, we could say black. Instead of Bantu, you see what I'm saying? It's a very generic term. So I want to be careful because I want you to know, really, when you read these. Well, in our literature, that's what we read. You know, that's all you really have unless you get deep. And you start going off and you go to France and you go to the Bibliothèque Nationale and you study for yourself. There's so much is missing, you know? But that tells me you're reading something, so keep doing what you're doing. Keep doing what you're doing. Any other questions before we move on? Bati or Bati?
Bati.
Did you have a question? You just looked at it. Okay. Yeah, Jaliyaa.
Yeah, Jaliyaa.
Alaleka Jaliyaa.
Alaleka Jaliyaa.
Now in West Africa, the griots or the jelly have their own musical instruments. One of the instruments of the jelly is called the kora. The kora is a harp, not like a harp. By definition, it is a harp. It is made of a gourd. That's what this big fat piece is. It was cut in half. It would be open in the front if there wasn't a cow skin that was put on it wet. The cow skin was put on it wet, and when it dried, this is what it looked like. It's held down by nails. That's what these nails are. And it's wood, cow skin, gourd. The strings are made of fishing line. That's all the strings are. And our fancy strings are made of fishing line. What I'm going to do, bati, bati, bati. What I'm going to do, bati, bati. What I'm going to do is play the kora. And when I play it, okay, understand we're dealing with other cultures, so just have patience with me. But when I start playing, I'm going to invite the ancestors in with words and Bamana. All right, it's not that scary stuff. Y'all relax, all right? Ain't no chairs starting to fly around, doors open. I just want you to understand how other cultures function. So in order for me to let you understand how other cultures function, I have to translate the language appropriately, and I have to give you the feeling of what's actually happening, all right? It's no different than Dia de los Muertos in Mexico. ¿Unas personas acá de México? ¿Sí?
Day of the Dead.
Una persona solamente. Uno, tres, cuatro personas. Cinco. Why did it, if I say, watch this. Any African Americans here? Raise your hands. No, of Mexican descent. That's what I should have said, right? Yeah. Because not everyone's from Mexico. Bati o bati. Dia de los Muertos in Mexico is the same respect for ancestry and lineage as many indigenous cultures in other parts of the world. But nobody gets freaky about Dia de los Muertos. People only get freaky when we add an African label to it. Then it's like, uh-oh, is that voodoo stuff? Don't even say you weren't thinking it. But I'm gonna invite the ancestors in, we're gonna play music, and then I'm gonna sing. When I get to yeah, Jaliyaa, you guys be ready to give back. Will you be ready?
Yes.
Yes. All right.
Yeah.
I feel that you will. Do not listen to the quarter with your ears. Listen with your hearts. Nyate Jaliyaa nye nyakale di bi Jaliyaa de korobo gajele ke ninke jali ke babi orana ye yogala. Ambia sinana, kumbemba jali musaning jale kelu, ambia sinana. Listen close, it's coming up. Bula bula julula, ibora bora kora jaluna. Ambia sinana, kumbemba jali musaning jale kelu, ambia sinana. Okay, y'all ready? Are y'all ready?
Yeah.
Yeah, Jaliyaa.
Yeah, Jaliyaa.
A little louder. Alaleka Jaliyaa.
Alaleka Jaliyaa.
I want to feel it. Let me feel it. Yeah, Jaliyaa.
Yeah, Jaliyaa.
That's it. Alaleka Jaliyaa. Alaleka
Jaliyaa.
Ambia sinana. Kumbemba jali musaning jarakil ambia sinana. There was once a beggar, a very poor beggar, who walked the streets of his village. He had a small wooden bowl. He would take this wooden bowl and he would hold it up and he would chant throughout the streets of the village. A little rice for my bowl. A little rice to save this poor wretched soul. Well, the people in this village weren't wealthy, but they would give him a little rice. Each family would offer a little rice. And then by evening, by nightfall, he would have enough rice to go home and have a meal. This was his life, every day. Yeah, Jaliyaa.
Yeah, Jaliyaa.
Alaleka Jaliyaa.
Alaleka Jaliyaa.
One day the beggar is walking through the streets and he's begging. He's holding his bowl and he's saying, a little rice for my bowl. A little rice to feed this poor, wretched soul. But on this day, Bati Bati, on this day, the people are more generous than they ever have been. He has enough rice by noon to go home and to eat. This has never happened before. His bowl, his little wooden bowl, is overflowing with rice. So he begins to walk down the center of the street to head home. And as he's walking down the center of the street with this overflowing bowl of rice, men on horseback come riding through. Yeah, Jaliyaa.
Yeah, Jaliyaa.
Alaleka Jaliyaa.
Alaleka Jaliyaa.
Men on horseback come riding through, and one of them stops. They almost knock him over. The beggar turns to protect his bowl, and then he looks over to see who has stopped. And when he looks up, he sees that the one who has stopped is none other than the king. He sees the king, and the king asks him, what is that you are protecting? And the beggar turns to show him his little wooden bowl of overflowing rice. The king then says, give me your bowl. The beggar, he doesn't understand why the king would want to take his bowl, but it's the king. So he hands the king his bowl. And then the king says, we've been riding for days. We have not eaten in these days. I am so hungry. Please tell me, how many grains of rice will you allow me to take from this bowl and eat? The beggar cannot believe his ears. The king, the wealthiest man in the land, wants to take from a beggar's bowl and eat. Well, the beggar is upset, but he can't show the king that on his face. So he uses the king's words against him. When the king says, how many grains of rice will you allow me to eat from this bowl? The beggar says, Your Highness, I can't imagine you being hungry. Please fill your belly, eat to your content. Take 5 grains of rice. The king says, 5 grains is it? So the king, he counts. He says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And he hands the bowl back to the beggar. The beggar is overjoyed because now he still has an overflowing bowl of rice, and all he is missing are 5 grains. Yeah, Jaliyaa.
Yeah, Jaliyaa.
Alaleka Jaliyaa da.
Alaleka Jaliyaa.
Ambiya sinana. Kumbemba. Dili musaninjareke. Ambiya sinana. The beggar goes home. He sits down to eat his rice. And as he's eating his rice, something's wrong. He stops because there's something wrong with the rice in his mouth. He spits it out and he looks in his hand. And there among the rice was the size of a grain of rice, a tiny gold nugget. The beggar searches his bowl. He finds a second, a third, a fourth, and a fifth. He lines them up on the table. He looks at them. He counts. And for the life of him, the beggar cannot figure out where his good fortune came from. It's like so many people in this world. Good fortune is constantly happening to us. Do you know the origins of it? Yeah, Jaliyaa.
Yeah, Jaliyaa.
Wait again. Alaleka Jaliyaa da.
Alaleka Jaliyaa.
Okay, now you clap. Bati.
Bati.
I'm not even going to ask y'all if y'all know where the gold came from. Is there anybody lost about where the gold came from? Is anybody lost? Where? Oh, come on. Bati.
Bati.
Stories are transcendent. Our ultimate goal as human beings is to transcend. Transcendence is realizing who we are in the moment and then transcending that. Becoming more, reaching our potential. Transcendence is you reaching for more. An analogy would be a flower that's been planted. A flower could stay a seed forever, but its job is to transcend. Transcend. So what does it do? It struggles. It struggles to make its way through the soil. It struggles to come up out of the earth. And then it struggles even more to become beautiful. That's what we're here for. Transcendence. Bati.
Bati.
All right. 2 questions before we go on. I have a lot more I want to do before we go on. And I need to fit it in the amount of time we have. What time do we have?
1:15.
Oh, good. Good. I'm right on track. Any questions before we move on? 5. Oh.
When I was in Egypt and Libya, I felt and I saw part of American African culture and identity. I was going to ask you, if you want to present this workshop for younger kids, 5 or 6, 7, what will be your message?
I always do this. what we have to realize, and it's funny, I'm glad you asked that the way you did. People make assumptions. They'll see me in front of a group of college students and they'll say, oh, that was wonderful, but that would never work for my high school students. And then they'll see me in front of high school students and they'll say, well, that was wonderful, but that would never work for my college students. And then when I'm in a middle school, they're like, oh yeah, he's a middle school guy. They resonate so well with him and he could never go to higher. People tend to only see what they see. But I cannot call myself a professional if I cannot diversify my skills. So I work with TK, pre-K, Head Start, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, and whatever this is. I literally, let me give you an example. And I don't know why. In our country, sometimes, and I'm not denigrating or berating our country, but like what you're saying, I've been to those countries. Whenever I get called out of the country, no one has a problem seeing my capacity to engage all those different levels. In a few months, I'll be in Beijing, right? I'll be in Beijing, and they have me touring what would be considered our kinder, all the way up to 12th grade. And I'm spending separate weeks at each of those grade levels, right? But they never had a question about whether I could do it or not. Only here, and usually in the lower grade levels is you get teachers who are like, they see me perform with maybe 5th graders. And they're like, oh, I wish we had something similar for our kinder, but that would not be good for our kinder. And I'm always saying, I would not do that I did there for kinder. And I expect our education professionals to have more creativity and to engage differently, the way you engage. I expect that, but.
I work here, I teach.
Oh. Okay, that explains a lot. I'm thinking another student. Okay. Bati. But yes, I work very hard. And you know, and I employ a lot of psychology. I even go back and like Erickson's developmental stages there. And people think a lot of that stuff is defunct now, but it's still functional. Pascal, you have to use, and I used to use a lot of Gardner, Howard Gardner. I used to use a ton of Gardner because, and this, you guys will appreciate it. Okay, I'm a little wonky, a little geeky. Okay. Gardner came out with his book on multiple intelligences like 1984. 84. But he revived. Am I talking to you guys about something you already know? Multiple intelligences?
Some child development folks in here.
Relate.
But not all.
Okay, well, anyway, if you don't know, you'll catch up soon. But Gardner had a theory called multiple intelligence where he basically said everyone has certain strengths. And these strengths were kinesthetic, mathematical, logical, mathematical, just different strengths, right? And that you have to recognize the strength in each of your students, and then you have to take that strength and you have to use it to help them become the scholars that everyone could become. Everyone has capacity to become a scholar. There is no one who does not. So it challenged teachers to differentiate. And it is a problem because most people teach from their strength. Their strength. But here's the beauty of Jaliyaa. Here's the beauty of Jaliyaa. You're an educator, I'm just going to use language. When it comes to differentiation, here we have an external locus of control. So we look for supplies, materials to help us differentiate for this student, that student, or another. But in Jaliyaa, the responsibility of differentiating is intrinsic. It's an internal locus of control. So the jelly has to recognize her audience, her people, and she has to fit herself into the learner's mind. So there's the storyteller, I hate using that word because it doesn't describe, becomes a musician if they need to. The storyteller becomes a mathematician if they need to. They take the discomfort of what we see as their weaknesses and then they build on them. Here's another way of looking at it. In the Western model, everyone is compartmentalized into each of these learning capacities. In the West African or the Jaliyaa model, You all contain every single one of those intelligences. It's just working to bring them out. Some are more dormant, some are more muted, but you possess all of them. It's a more holistic way of looking at the learner. So I use that, especially when I do professional development. That's what I do. I take Gardner's stuff, and then I take Jaliyaa. That's what I did with your husband. And I showed them the wedding of the two different cultures, how they're looked at in a different ways. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I'm a storyteller. I will start. I'll start riffing and going up. I want to get back into this. Any other questions before? Yes, Gary.
So Jaliyaa is more of like the eclectic way of teaching.
That's my man right there. Jaliyaa, why have I never thought of that? Darius said Jaliyaa is a more eclectic way of teaching.
What was his question?
He said Jaliyaa is a more eclectic way of teaching. That's brilliant. I hope you don't mind if I start using that from now on. Okay, I'll give you credit. While I'm in Beijing, it'll be like Darius said. Bati, oh, bati.
Bati.
Any other questions before we move on? There's a few more things I want to do. Bati, oh, bati. Most of my work, especially when I deal with younger people, has to do with listening. Teaching listening as a skill. We're going to do a little exercise, and I'm going to show you how other cultures use their practices to teach. Now, no one in Bamana culture would ever say they teach their children listening. It's just a part of the culture. Like in Egypt and Libya, there are indigenous cultures where they have music and it's intertwined with everything, with the food, with the gathering, with the dance.
Yeah.
Now, we're going to do a little exercise. Do not be self-conscious, all right? Because it is a listening exercise, but I just want to give you an example of how cultures are very different. I am not going to trick any of you. I am not here to fool you, trick you, make you look silly, none of that. But we have a deficit of truly listening as a skill in our society, and I'm going to show you. And don't worry, I'm going to give you a song. I'm going to tell you where you were going to mess up. I'm going to tell you how you were going to mess up. I'm even going to tell you when, at what point you were going to mess up. And many of y'all are still going to mess up. And it is not a trick. It is not a trick. It has to do with listening. So let's just jump into it. I want you to do this. Repeat after me. E-I-A.
E-I-A.
Now make the sound of the letter N like I'm about to make it after me, and then just clip it, cut it short. In Bamana, that's how you say I or me. It's a pronoun. Possessive and it's a pronoun. E-I-A.
E-I-A.
Te-te.
Te-te.
Kumala.
Kumala.
Okay, now listen carefully. Listen. It's a song. Don't sing back. I just want you to hear what it sounds like first. It's a song. So the call and response is important. All right? That's when we get into the listening aspect of this. That's when we're learning from one another. So the song sounds like this. It goes, E-I-A, E-I-A, te-te kumala. The response is just the same. E-I-A, E-I-A, te-te kumala. That's the first part. Y'all are not going to mess that up. All right? You will not mess that up, so relax. All right? Repeat after me. Call response. Here we go. E-I-A, E-I-A, te-te kumala. E-I-A, E-I-A, te-te kumala. One more time. E-I-A, E-I-A, te-te kumala. Now, I'm going to sing some words you do not know, but you don't have to know the words. All you have to do is listen to the sounds of the words. Now, all you're going to say is, Tete kumala, something you already know. Okay? My part, the words you do not know, just listen to the sounds. And your part, so it goes, Mani makula lungoma, tete kumala. You guys hear your part?
Yeah.
All right. My part, listen to the sound. Mani makula lungoma, tete kumala. You guys got it?
Yeah.
All right, here we go. Mani makula lungoma.
Tete kumala.
Oh, goodness. Okay, that's all right for first try, but my expectations are very high for you, so we're going to keep doing this, all right? Here we go. After me. Tete kumala. Tete kumala. It's like tay-tay. I'll angle aside, but don't say tay-tay when we sing. All right? It's tete kumala. So, tete kumala. Tete kumala. Now, that's all you have to do. My part, your part. Mayi ma kula lungo ma. Tete kumala. You hear how strong that was? Keep it that strong. Now, the next phrase is where everyone messes up. I'm going to tell you where. I'm going to tell you how. Just trust me on this. You have to wait until the end of the phrase to say Tete kumala. The phrase, listen to the sounds of the phrase. Niseren kuala lungo, inala bunyoku, jawola lungo le, tete kumala. You hear? I'm going to sing it again because I want you to hear what it sounds like. Niseren kuala lungo, inala bunyoku, jawola lungo le, tete kumala. You guys got it?
Yeah.
Everybody got it?
Yes.
Everybody's nodding yet. Somebody is going to say it in the middle of the phrase before I finish it. It never fails. All right? So we're going to sing the whole thing, and you got to bring it strong. And here's the most important thing. Do not be afraid of making a mistake. This is where you get to challenge yourself, transcend, because everyone is always afraid of messing up. But messing up is how we grow. So bring it strong. All right? Iya-ye, iya-ye, tete kumala. Y'all gonna make me talk bad about y'all when I leave, and y'all don't want to do that. I'm gonna give it to you again. There it is. Have my back here, man. All right. Here we go. Iya-ye, iya-ye, tete kumala. Iya-ye, iya-ye. There you go. Iya-ye, iya-ye, tete kumala. Iya-ye, iya-ye, tete kumala. Mani makula lungoma.
Tete kumala.
Bati. Do you know why that happened? Because people are afraid of making a mistake. You're anticipating messing up. You do not want to mess up. You want to be perfect. There is no such thing as perfection. You got to this point, sitting in this room, by making mistakes along the way. A lot of them, some more than others. But you're here. Embrace those mistakes, because this is the safe place to make them. In here. Let's try it again. Look, wait a minute. Mayi makula lungoma. What happened to y'all in the song? All right, start over. Here we go. Iya-ye, iya-ye, tete kumala. Iya-ye, yes. Tete kumala. Iya-ye, iya-ye, tete kumala. Iya-ye, iya-ye, tete kumala. Mayi makula lungoma. Tete kumala. Nisirin kuala lungo.
Tete kumala.
Okay. Bati. How many of you caught it? Yeah. What happened? Who wants to tell me what happened?
You weren't done singing.
I wasn't finished with the phrase. Okay. Don't feel bad. You guys are like, oh. I'm not tricking you. I'm using another cultural paradigm to show you in our society how we have a deficit of true listening. It's not saying you're not a good person, oh, you're horrible, oh, you said that they come along in the middle, you know, that's not what it's about. It's about recognizing, okay? Now, even though you know, some of you are going to get it right, and then other people are going to mess it up. I don't know why, but that's the way it is. Y'all want to try it again?
Yes.
Trust me on this. It's just the way it goes. Ia-ye, tete kumala. Ia-ye, tete kumala. Ia-ye, tete kumala. Tete kumala. Manyima kula nungoma. Tete kumala. Nizirin kula nungo. Inala punya ku. Chabula nungole. Tete kumala. You guys did it. All right. Bati bati. Bati. Now let's do it with music. When I am working with children, this is a very effective way to demonstrate that learning is a skill. Because in our society, we do not look at it as a skill. If you have ears, we imagine, oh, well, you're capable of hearing. Yes, you are capable of hearing if your ears work, but listening is a whole other thing. So when we are teaching children how to listen, this is a way of introducing them to the concept of listening as a skill. So now, let's go through the song. Here we go. And some of you are still gonna say it in the middle, it's okay, I'll just keep rolling, all right? Here we go. Ia-ye, tete kumala. A little louder. Ia-ye, tete kumala. Manyima kula nungoma. Tete kumala. Nizirin kula nungo. Inala munyo ku. Jawula nungole. Ia-ye, tete kumala. Ia-ye, tete kumala. Ia-ye, tete kumala. There was once a king who had 2 servants. These servants waited on him night and day and night. But the king tired of this. He wanted to get rid of one and keep the other. So the king, he devised a plan. He would ask them a question. He would introduce them to a new idea that he had of ruling the kingdom. And depending on how they answered the question, he would get rid of one, he would keep the other. Ia-ye, tete kumala. Ia-ye, tete kumala. Now, the king called the 2 men into his great chamber. One man, the first servant, let's call him the first servant, stood on this side over here. The other servant, he stood on this side over here. The king presented his new idea of how to rule the kingdom. And then he turned to the servant on this side and he said, tell me what you think of this new idea I have. And the man on this side, he said, oh, your highness, that is truly an inspirational idea. It is beyond brilliant. You are truly a genius for what you are proposing. What you are saying will only benefit the people of our kingdom. Then the king, he turned to the man on this side and he said, tell me what you think of my idea to rule the kingdom. And the man on this side, he said, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. He said, I cannot believe that you are supposed to be a king and such lunacy could come from your mouth. He said, what you are proposing will only do harm to the people. Well, the king got rid of one and kept the other. Did he get rid of this guy? Okay, raise your hand. Show of hands. How many people think he got rid of this guy? Hands down. How many people think he got rid of this guy? He got rid of this guy over here. He got rid of him. Come on, y'all are old enough to know human nature. People only want to be told good things about themselves, their ideas. How often does someone want to be told something not so true about themselves? Now, over time, the king made the man with the words that was sugar-coated. He made that man very wealthy. He gave him gifts of land and cattle and gold. In fact, that servant who gave those beautiful words to the king became more wealthy than many nobles. But one day, he was in his fine home when he thought, years ago, whatever happened to the other man that was in that room with me? Whatever became of him? So he decided to find him. Tete kumala. Here it comes. Mani makula lungoma. Tete kumala. Listening kula lungo. Inala bunyo kuja wola lungole. Tete kumala. Tete kumala. So he searched for him. The first servant searched for the man, the other servant. And over time he found him. And when he found him, when he found the second guy living in a hovel, an old hut with a dirt floor. And he found him seated in the middle of this dirt floor, dressed in rags, eating a bowl of very simple, meager, simple soup. He saw him and he said, "Oh, what has become of you? Look at you." He stands there dressed in his fine clothes. And he looks at him and he says, "If you had learned to obey a king, you would not have to eat such simple soup." But the man on the floor eating the soup, he looks up and he says, "No, you have it wrong. If you had learned to eat simple soup, you would not have to obey a king." One more. Bati. I think we're about at the close of our time. Who has the time for me?
2:17.
Oh, okay. I'm going to save the last little bit of time because I would talk constantly. All right? But I'm going to save the last little bit of time for you because this is important. It needs to be a dialogue. It needs to be an exchange. I do not come to teach. In this craft, the jelly comes to learn. Now, I'm going to tell you an aspect of it that doesn't exist with us. When I opened asking you for your eyes, you guys have probably noticed that I have looked into every single person's eyes here. That's learning. It is a form of learning that permits me to know that there is a relationship here, that I can feel safe here. I am learning this environment through what you are giving me. You are teaching. You are teaching. All of you are teachers. Whether you have your credentials yet or not, you're teachers. All right? So, bati. Anyone want to make statements or a question before I let you walk out the door? Because I got to take a couple of pictures too, so y'all don't move. I got Instagram. I got to do my thing. What's my Instagram?
Yeah.
How many people here got their phone with them? All right, bust them out. Instagram is Baba the Storyteller. It's that simple. Baba the Storyteller. It'll pop up. It'll pop up. But anyone have anything you want to ask, engage, or share before we walk out of this room? Because remember, I told you, these gatherings are sacred. This one will never repeat itself. Ever. Even if I come back to this school, this will not be the gathering that occurs. Gatherings are sacred. Never forget that. When you end up in these classes, you're not just going to class, you're going to a gathering of souls. And there's a reason why you're in there. Bati. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Did you very carefully set up that we make eye contact, etc.? Do you ever have a situation where you're looking at someone and they're not getting it? I teach here, and up until like maybe 8 years ago or something, I make eye contact with students very directly, like, Darius, I'm looking at you, and you know it, right? And I get, "Oh, are you looking at me?" And it's like this direct, right, or this direct, and the students say, oh, are you looking at me? Or they'll just look around like, who is she looking at?
I'm going to
And
tell
I
you.
think we're at ease in the classroom and everything, I think, but,
I'm going to tell you why that happens.
yeah.
Next year will be my 25th year, 25 years of doing this. Next year will be 25 years. And I've literally traveled the world going K-12 and universities. I'm going to tell you why that happens. Because in the majority of students' K-12 experiences, they rarely, if ever, make eye contact with their teachers. I know that sounds shocking to you. But if you think about your K-12 experiences, how many of them were intimately intertwined with your teacher, looking directly into your eyes and engaging you? Or how many of you felt like you were just another body in a chair?
Could I see hands? Excuse me, but I don't think.
I
Did you
felt
feel
like
that?
I was a body in a chair.
Yeah.
How many of you felt like that K-12? Like I was a body in a chair?
After third grade.
Especially after third grade. In fact, do you know among young black males, there's a thing called fourth grade failure syndrome. I don't know if y'all ever heard of this. Well, I'm sorry, I'm going on. See, y'all got me in an environment. But yes, there's something about black males up into third grade where young black males are typically successful up to about third grade. After third grade, the failure rate drops astronomically in the upper 80 percentiles. And that's why, this was back in the 70s when this research was started, but now they're calling it the school to prison pipeline. But that research has gone on for more than 40 some odd years. That research has been there. It's been there. And when Obama came in, he had the My Brother's Keeper program, which is starting to be cut. But see, y'all didn't ask me this. Any other questions before we close out? Yes, ma'am.
I forgot what the line stood for. Like,
Mansa, M-A-N-S-A.
spell. I am a horrible speller.
Give me your phone. All right. Any other questions while I type this out for her? Hold on.
I do.
Yes.
First of all, I want to say thank you so much for your time
Yes,
and
that's-
exposing us for different world. It is, to me, as an educator, it is so important to expose young kids from early years to different language and different culture.
Can I ask where you're from?
Persian, Iran.
What, Iran.
Yeah,
Did you grow up there?
until 18 years old.
This is just a natural part of your culture. What we're doing here, did you grow up in the city, Tehran, or did you?
City, yeah.
Oh, you're a city girl. Never mind. Never mind. I have an open invitation to Iran, and they have been wanting to bring me there for over 10 years. And every time I get ready to go,
Something happened.
some administration comes in and starts fighting with Iran. And Iran, the storytelling culture is so beautiful there.
Rich.
It is so. Some of the stories I'm using come from that culture, but they've been translated for this audience. So you have many of the, Islam is big. You have many of the hadiths. You have a lot of the Sufi tales, the esoteric part of Islam. Those things are many things that I use because those things exist in Africa parallel to the way they are in Persian cultures.
Powerful.
Yeah. In fact, many of my closest friends now are from that area of the world, and they are storytellers and Sufi speakers, and yeah.